Hey, it's Will Saletan from the Bulwark. Well, after weeks of happiness, something sad finally happened to Donald Trump. I don't mean the fires in California. Trump could care less about those liberals in California. No, I'm talking about a sad thing that happened to the person Trump cares about most himself. On Friday, Trump was formally sentenced for his 34 felony convictions in the New York hush money case. He didn't get any jail time because, as the incoming president, he has legal immunity against any sentence that would interfere with his job. But it still hurts to be certified as a felon. So it was a tough day for Trump and his many bootlicking apologists. But on the bright side, bootlicking is their job, and they're really good at it. So today, let's give a shout out to the most creative lies and excuses they've come up with to cope with this terrible tragedy. Here are the top 10 right-wing copes for Donald Trump's formal certification as a felon. Number 10, voters are the only jury that matters. We've heard this line from lots of Republicans, but none of them craves attention more than Congresswoman Nancy Mace. So let's be nice and give her the attention. Here's what she said on Instagram right after Trump was sentenced.
The only judge that matters today is you, the American people. You are judge and jury, and you elected Donald Trump to win for America. And thank you, and God bless you for doing that. You are the only judge, you, the people, that matter.
Can you feel the desperation there? You're the only judge. You're the only jury. It's obvious bullshit because there was an actual jury in this case that sat for more than a month and listened to all the evidence and found Trump guilty. But Republicans can't handle that, so they pretend that the real jury didn't exist. In fact, Trump has his own version of this cope, and he presented it in court just before he got sentenced. Let's call this one cope number 9. Voters are the real jury because they saw the trial firsthand. Here's what Trump told the judge.
And the people of our country got to see this firsthand because they watched the case in your courtroom. They got to see this firsthand, and then they voted, and I won and got the largest number of votes by far of any Republican candidate in history, and won, as you know, all 7 swing states, won conclusively all 7 swing states, and won the popular vote by millions and millions of votes. And they've been watching your trial, so they understood it.
Okay, so first of all, the people of our country did not see this trial firsthand. You may have noticed that what I just played for you is audio from the court, not video. And the reason there's no video is no cameras were allowed in that courtroom, not during the sentencing and not during the trial. And during the trial, no audio was available either. So the jury did hear the evidence, but the voters did not. And that's one reason why the jury convicted Trump while the voters reelected him. Now, to be fair, there was plenty of media coverage of the trial, and a lot of voters did pay attention to that. So let's see what those voters thought. Here's a question from the National Votecast survey that was conducted as people were actually voting. As you can see, a majority, 53%, said that the legal cases involving Donald Trump were an important factor in how they voted. But that majority did not vote for Trump. 73% of them voted against him. So Trump didn't win because the jury of voters who paid attention to his trial thought he was unjustly prosecuted. He won because that jury of voters got outvoted by other people who didn't pay attention or didn't care. So let's go back to the real jury, the one inside the courtroom. Some of Trump's allies say the jury simply got it wrong. And one of their arguments is cope number 8. The jury didn't hear all the evidence. Let's hear this one from Greta Van Susteren, a host on Newsmax.
The fact that it's a jury verdict, I appreciate jury service. I appreciate they did that, but they're not infallible. They don't hear all the evidence. They don't hear all the defense.
Well, that's true. In every trial, there's some evidence that the jury doesn't hear because the defense objects or the prosecution objects, and the judge keeps that evidence out of the courtroom. But then, why did Trump and Nancy Mace and other Republicans pretend that voters know better than the jury did? Voters didn't hear any of the evidence. So let's not pretend that the fallibility of juries is a reason to trust the voters instead. Next up is cope number 7. Trump's lame sentence shows he didn't do anything wrong. For this one, let's listen to Rob Finnerty, another Newsmax host.
The man they called Hitler will serve no time in prison. He will pay no fines, not $1. He will not be on parole. Further proof that this whole thing was a farce from the word go. Nobody would get off that good, especially in New York City, if they were just convicted on 34 felony counts.
You know what? That's true. Nobody else with 34 felony convictions would have gotten off so easy. But that's not because Trump is innocent. It's because he's going to be president. When the judge gave Trump his pathetically lame sentence, he said Trump was going to walk free because the president basically is above the law. Listen.
This court has determined that the only lawful sentence that permits entry of a judgment of conviction without encroaching upon the highest office in the land is an unconditional discharge.
In fact, the judge specifically said that the empty sentence was not about the severity or triviality of the crime.
The protections afforded the office of the president are not a mitigating factor. They do not reduce the seriousness of the crime or justify its commission in any way.
Okay, so that cope was about how light the sentence was, that the judge basically did nothing to Trump. But at the same time, Trump's fanboys are complaining that his conviction is too harsh and mean. And one version of this complaint is cope number 6. Trump has been unjustly stripped of his rights. Let's hear it from Jesse Waters, a host on Fox News.
Now he's a convict. Donald Trump in some states can't vote. He can't own a weapon. So a 2-term U.S. president has less rights than most of the other people in this country.
Oh, that's so sad. That's so wrong. Trump can't vote or own a gun in some states just because he's a convicted felon? How dare the courts and legislatures in every state treat him just like every other felon? I've never heard such deeply felt sympathy from Republicans for the rights of a poor convicted felon. Doesn't it warm your heart? Of course, not all of Trump's flunkies are feeling empathetic. Some are quite pissed off, and they're looking for people to blame. And that brings us to cope number 5. Trump was betrayed by Amy Coney Barrett. The complaint here is that Justice Barrett, who was appointed to the Supreme Court by Trump 4 years ago, voted with a majority of the court not to intervene in the hush money case and not to block the judge from sentencing Trump. Here's Carl Higbie, another host on Newsmax.
It could have been stopped, too. But Amy Coney Barrett, this woman, voted with the liberals to okay the sentencing for the guy who will be president in 9 days. The guy who appointed her, by the way, after telling us that the presidents should enjoy presidential immunity.
Higbie is lying, of course. Barrett did not vote to okay the sentencing of Trump. She just did what a principled conservative judge is supposed to do, which is not to intervene unless you have to. But Higbie and Trump's other MAGA followers don't have any principles. The only thing they care about is loyalty to Trump. That's why they're furious at Barrett, or as Higbie refers to her, this woman, for failing to protect the boss. And that attitude about Trump, that he's the ultimate authority and that laws for little people don't apply to him, that attitude is pervasive on the right. It also shows up, for example, in Cope number 4. Convicting Trump is like arresting Abraham Lincoln. You're probably thinking, they wouldn't actually say that, would they? Oh, but they have. Let's watch John Yoo, a right-wing law professor, talking about the courts in New York.
You have a state here attacking someone who is the president-elect. A state attacking, as you said, the supremacy clause is supposed to stop states from interfering with the valid operations of the federal government. It's almost as if Lincoln, after he was elected, trying to get to Washington, D.C., and Maryland decided to arrest him on his way to the Capitol.
Almost. It's almost the same, except that Trump isn't getting detained, and he actually got tried and convicted as a private citizen before he got elected. And an arrest isn't the same as a conviction. And also, as far as we know, Abe Lincoln never falsified business records to cover up payments to a porn star to keep her quiet so he could win an election. But that's not the craziest thing we've heard from a law professor defending Trump. I got 2 more for you. The next one is Cope number 3. Trump is the victim of a Soviet show trial. Take it from Alan Dershowitz, the longtime Harvard law professor who's now a regular on right-wing TV.
He's not a convicted felon. I refuse to call him a convicted felon any more than I would call somebody convicted in the Soviet Union back in the 1950s or somebody convicted in Iran today a convicted felon. This was not a legitimate case.
The Soviet Union, huh? A billionaire who got convicted by a New York jury, selected in part by his own high-priced legal team, in a trial attended by reporters from dozens of news organizations, is just like some poor guy in a Soviet gulag? And that isn't even the most ridiculous thing Dershowitz has said. The most ridiculous thing he said, so far, is Cope number 2. Trump is like a persecuted civil rights worker. Here's Dershowitz again.
I will never call Donald Trump a convicted felon any more than I would have called a civil rights worker who was convicted of spitting on the street in the South when I was part of the demonstrations down there, a convicted felon. He is a convicted, innocent man.
A civil rights worker in the South. Dershowitz is comparing Donald Trump, who literally got sued by the Justice Department 50 years ago for discrimination against black tenants, to civil rights workers in the Jim Crow South. But the best Cope, the one that really captures the mentality of MAGA, is that Trump wasn't even convicted by a real jury. No, Cope number 1 is that Trump's jury was rigged by the FBI and the CIA. For real, listen to Greg Kelly, the son of a former New York police commissioner who now has a primetime show on Newsmax.
Look, I'm suspicious. I don't think that all the government just would leave it to chance, right? They wanted to take President Trump out. Would they have arranged to make sure the jury pool was dominated by, say, I don't think you could just count on Democrats. I think you had to count on government contractors, 3-letter agencies.
I have a 3-letter word for you, Mr. Kelly. In fact, I got a whole jar of them. Look, let's take off the tinfoil and put away the nuts and just face the facts. Donald Trump is a convicted felon. He was convicted by a real jury, just like other felons. And I'll be honest, this wasn't even the best case against Trump. The other cases, the ones about Trump stealing classified documents and hiding them from the government and using fraud to try to overturn the 2020 election, those cases were actually stronger. But this was the only case that went to trial before Trump won the election. And he was convicted, and he is a felon. And until he finds some way to throw out this case and pretend it never happened, which he might, all those Trump-loving saps and bootlickers in Congress and right-wing media are just going to have to suck it up and deal with it. See you next time.